Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. We've got a ton of topics to get into today, especially all the stuff going on with Ja Morant. So we'll dive into that in just a moment. But first, I want to say thank you for everybody who joined us last Friday for Front Office Friday. That was a lot of fun. The live show. I think we are going to make that a consistent thing. We haven't settled on exact time just yet. For those of you who popped in and joined the show live, that was a blast. Enjoyed taking all those questions and comments from all of you. Keith, that was a great way, I thought, to finish off the week, just getting to interact directly with the listeners and viewers.
Yeah, I loved it. We had a lot of fun, a lot of really good questions that weren't just Celtics or just Lakers. So that was very
Right.
nice for a change for the two of us. And yeah, I mean, some really good kind of thoughtful questions too. And I think those we'll continue to do those as the season wraps up here, and especially as we get into kind of our more of our wheelhouse with the transactional period starting, which is crazy. So over at Spot Track, we're kind of mapping out like the spring and into the summertime. It's like we're gonna be there before we know it. Like it is
Oh, yeah.
so crazy that we're already like approaching the middle of March. It feels like everything is zipping right by the season, the school year for at least for our daughter, like all that stuff. It just feels like we are zooming through this, and it's I don't even know where the time's going. So, but I guess that's a good thing, right? It's they always say time flies when you're having fun, so it must be
That's
having
right.
some fun.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Before we know it, we're going to be talking draft. We're going to be talking free agency and all kinds of stuff that's going to be coming. And then, of course, there's that little thing called the playoffs that we'll
Yeah, yeah.
have happening
The
as
reason
well.
the reason these teams presumably play, but
Right.
we'll see. So yeah,
That's part of it.
yep.
All right. Well, Keith, there's no avoiding it. We haven't talked about it yet. Well, we haven't talked about this exact. We talked about a Ja Morant situation.
Yeah.
I believe it was last week. That was a different situation. Now we've got Ja Morant away from the Memphis Grizzlies for at least 2 games. I'd imagine it's going to be more. He's missing tonight's game against the Lakers. Already missed the previous game against the Clippers since we recorded last. And this is a mess. I mean, he was on Instagram Live holding a gun in a nightclub. Oh man, I mean, there's so much to unpack here. He issued that statement saying he's going to take a step away from the team and get some help and all that. So we don't know if or when Ja Morant is going to return. I guess the place to start with this, because I've heard a lot of outpouring from players, both current and former players, talking about Ja and hoping he gets back to doing what he does. And of course, that's the way we all feel. But what's the NBA's perspective on this? How is the NBA going to treat this?
Yeah, that's what we're kind of now keeping an eye on. I believe it was Mark Stein who noted that in the CBA there is language. I think it may have come in after the Gilbert Arenas stuff, which feels like that was a lifetime ago now. But it came through, and it you know they added language around if you bring a gun onto team premises, whether that be the practice facility, the arena, even the team plane, anything like that, it's an automatic 50-game suspension. So now one part of what the league is looking into is where was the gun? Where did you get it from? Who had it? It's probably going to be pretty hard to prove unless somebody says, hey, it was with him on the plane or whatever it is. If it is, that's a major problem, right? Because now you're talking a suspension that will not only last the rest of this year, but will go deep into next season as well. So those are the things that the league is looking into. Obviously, we all hope, like you said, and so many players have really spoken really, really well about this is figure it out, man. Like there's just way too much to lose for, I don't understand any upside. Like I get it. That's not my world, right? Like I grew up in a very different world than that. I live in a very different world, but I don't see what the upside is to this sort of behavior out of Ja Morant. I thought Jalen Rose really, was very eloquent of like, hey man, I lived that life, like actually lived that life. And if you read stuff about Jalen Rose, he was involved multiple times, never doing anything bad. He was usually playing video games and hanging out, but in like crack houses getting busted and things like that. And those are just that was just his life as he grew up, and he explained, he's like, this, you don't need to be doing this now, right? Because this is not something John Morant did before, right? Before getting to the NBA. This all seems newer to this. So yeah, it is very disconcerting that we're at this point. So hopefully his time away allows him to figure stuff out, and then it allows the league to do what they need to do as far as their research and investigations and all that stuff, and then we kind of can hopefully come back, put this behind us, and move forward in a positive way. Because my fear is, it's like I said, these guys, people start looking for a reason to challenge these guys, whether it be basketball players, celebrities,
Yes.
whoever it is. And sometimes then somebody pulls a gun out somewhere, and then all of a sudden things could go really sideways. And that's just not where you want to be. That's, nobody wants it to end in a way where anyone loses life or is injured or anything like that. So let's kind of, I would say, nip this in the bud, but that's not, like, it's
We're
already
past that.
past that point. So let's end it now and get things sorted and figured out as best we can.
This is terrible for a guy who the league was looking at as potentially one of the new faces of the NBA coming up, to have to deal with this situation. Hopefully, this is bottom. You know what I mean? Like, this is
Yeah.
it, and everything turns around from here. Because you're right, there is no upside to it. There's no upside to any of this kind of stuff. The only thing you're going to do is you're gonna hurt the league. You're going to hurt your own career. You're going to hurt your own financial, your ability to earn money, because you're going to lose endorsements. You're
Yep.
going to potentially find yourself out of the league if it goes far enough. So all of this kind of stuff obviously has to stop. And of course, his statement about stepping away and getting some help and all that. Hopefully, all of that is successful and works out. And we all want to see this turn out great for Ja Morant. He's a phenomenal talent and somebody that we want to see on the floor. Um, this whole 50-game suspension thing from the NBA, I don't like, if it turns out that the gun is his, if it's his gun, how else did it get there? If he
Yeah.
didn't bring it on the team plate,
Yep.
right? Like, so that's going to be, I think, the question for the NBA, and then how they proceed. Of course, I would expect Ja to say, no, it wasn't on the plane. You'd expect the Grizzlies to say, no, it definitely wasn't on the plane. But if it's
Yep.
his, like, it's going to be interesting to see how all of this unfolds. Not obviously not the kind of thing the Grizzlies want to be dealing with. They've had a great season, particularly as we head into the playoffs, and definitely not the kind of thing the NBA wants to have to deal with either. Man, Keith, I just hope that this all turns out that this is the low point, and it's all upside from here.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, if this is the bottom, then fine, right? We hit a bottom and did not end up in the worst place it could end up, for that. So that's just, let's get it sorted. Let's get things figured out. Let's get them back on the court, and then let's just play basketball. And that's not to say you can't have outside interest, but let's not have those outside interests, right? Let's be a little bit smarter about the things we're doing moving forward, and maybe the company you keep and those kind of things. We talked about it before. It's hard for guys to cut people off, especially if they're the people who've been with them since way before they were famous and rich and all these other things. But sometimes you gotta figure that stuff out. He needs people in his life that are kind of trying to help him versus not necessarily telling him what to do, but just maybe painting the whole picture. Hey man, this is where this can all go sideways. It's, I'm not saying John Moran is anything near this, but do you remember Keith Appling? I don't know if you remember him. Played at Michigan
Then
State.
I remember the
Played in
name.
played in the NBA for a couple years. Just went to jail for well, he's found guilty. He will go to prison. The sentence will be between 18 and 40 years for his role in a shooting death of someone. Like that's horrible, right? Nobody wants that. Like let's end this now and never ever ever end up in that kind of place.
So the last time we talked about this John Morant, and it was a different situation with John Morant. But the last time you and I discussed this, you mentioned the idea of, and this isn't a unique thing, the team assigning someone, hiring someone essentially to go with Ja. If he ever goes out, you recommended him staying at home for the most part. But if he does go out, someone goes with him, right? He's got, I don't want to say
That's going
he's
to be bare minimum.
right,
Yeah.
and I don't want to say it's a babysitter or something like that. But again, but essentially that's kind of the function. But Ja already had a situation. What was going on here? Was he by him? Did the Grizzlies not do that? Was he by himself? Who was actually with him? Like
Yeah.
those are also things that need to get looked at here.
Well, just the tone deafness too
Yeah.
from his side. You've been accused of pulling a gun on someone before. Why are you then taking a picture with a gun? Like why? Like what? I would, and it's funny. Very slipping into dad mode here, but the question I would ask is, what did you have to gain from that?
Yeah.
What like it's not because I don't know him to be Ja Morant firearm enthusiast, right? I've never noted that about him. Nobody's ever said that. What do you think it's clout for a bunch of stupid kids to think like, yeah, he's cool, he's got a piece, right? Like, come on, man, like what are we doing? Like that's like you just were accused for someone pulling a gun on someone, and now you're basically not only then you came out through your reps and denied that ever happened, but then literally days later, you pose with for a picture with a gun. Like that to me says, did that other thing actually happen? Like where are we at with this? Because what I just that's where I would it's I again I'm slipping into dad mode here, but it is very much of like, what are you getting out of this? Like what
Mm.
was there to gain? What's your benefit here? Because I'm struggling to find one.
When he was on live video. He was on Instagram. I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, hopefully this all works out for the best for all parties involved. But
Yep.
I'm sure the Grizzlies and Ja are going to be, and of course the entire NBA are going to be waiting with a lot of interest to see what it is that comes out of the NBA's investigation, because we could be looking at a Grizzly squad that doesn't have Ja Morant for the remainder of the season, for the playoffs, for the start of next season, if it turns out that he brought that gun on a team plane. And we'll see what happens there. All right, let's jump over to Colin Sexton. It's going to be out about a week. We just have some injury news here to get into, but Colin Sexton out about a week with a hamstring strain. The Jazz aren't going to be rushing anybody back from injury at
No.
this point in the season. Right now, we've talked about how insanely compact the West is. There is a four-way tie in the
Yep.
West currently between the Jazz, the Blazers, the Lakers, and the Pelicans. All four teams have the exact same record, but the Jazz and the Blazers both have an extremely difficult strength of schedule the rest of the way. And Utah in particular, we've talked about them. I don't think, well, the players are always going to play hard, but organizationally, I don't think they would be super disappointed if they dropped out of the play-in mix.
Yeah, I'm with you with that. The Thunder too. I might as well throw them in that mix because they're only a half game behind. But yeah, it's
Yes.
with them too. They openly said the other day, like they brought Shea Gilgeous-Alexander back, but then said we're going to be monitoring him the rest of the year. Like so, that to me says like probably not back to backs. If he's feeling anything, you're going to probably sit him out. So with Sexton, part of why they're being very careful is this is a second hamstring strain for him in the opposite leg of his first one. So they're just going to try to be very careful here, make sure he's good. I don't know that people realize how good Colin Sexton has been. If Utah had stayed in that above 500, pushing for a top 6 seed kind of realm all season long, he would have been getting serious sixth man of the year pub because he's averaging almost it was like 14 something points per game, shooting 51% from the field and almost 52% and 41% from three this year. So he's been really, really, really good. And now he's starting because after trading Mike Conley, he stepped into it's kind of more just they have guards with him and Jordan Clarkson. Neither one's like a point guard. They both kind of share the ball handling duties and do that stuff. But he stepped into the starting role right now. Your guy, Horton Tucker, is out there starting right now with Sexton out. But yeah, the Jazz are going to be very careful with him. My guess is we do see him again, but it's going to be probably limited, probably not necessarily back to backs the rest of the way. And again, if he's feeling anything, it's going to be time to sit him. I think by the time we get to the last couple weeks of the season, that's going to be a 3-team like battle there for between New Orleans, the Lakers, and the Trailblazers.
I think it's going to be OKC in there.
Could be.
Because OKC has one of the easiest strengths of schedules to finish the season, and the Blazers
Yeah.
have the second most difficult. But I think organizationally, the Blazers are going to be putting their foot on the gas pedal and doing what they can to try to win games, whereas OKC probably not. So that I think is a factor too.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you if I didn't think OKC was just heading in the
Yeah,
just openly coming out and saying we're gonna monitor Shea Gilgeous Alexander the rest of the way.
sure.
That to me says we're probably there. And I think what's important too is no, none of these teams are going to be anywhere close to the Rockets, Spurs, Pistons, and even the Hornets. None of them are going to get down that low. But you're talking, and it probably not even Orlando, right? So you're talking being somewhere in the range of sixth, best lottery odds. Now that's still a pretty good spot to be in, right? This is considered to be a fairly deep draft in the top 10ish, with pretty good players that should be impact guys in the league. So I think that's really important here to just even if it's not all about Wembanyama for these guys, because it probably isn't. It's still about, hey, let's put ourselves as high as we can get in this whole run.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Colin Sexton, you know what, Kate? There's a reason why you and I liked him a lot when you and I were both advocating for the Cavs to get something done with him when it
Yep.
didn't, when the whole Donovan Mitchell thing like wasn't even being mentioned. It wasn't even in our consciousness at that point. I recall both of us advocating for the Cavs getting something done with Colin Sexton and finding a deal because of exactly what you talked about, his efficiency. He scores a
Yeah.
lot of points and he does it very efficiently. That doesn't mean he's a great defensive player or something, or he's this guy that's going to lead your team to a championship. But it's not easy to find guys who take the kind of shots that he takes and makes them at a high percentage, and he does. So this is, I think, a piece for the Jazz moving forward. But ultimately, yeah, they're as a team, I would be surprised if they don't slide a bit here in the standings.
Yeah, I very much try to tell people there's a difference between empty stats on a bad team, which that's what Colin Sexton repeatedly got accused of.
Mhm.
That's a guy who averages 25 but shoots 42%,
Yeah.
right? And then what you have to decide is, all right, is that 42% because he's just not a good shooter and he's inefficient, or is it because he's having to take really tough shots all the time? And that's where, that's what you trust your scouts and your personnel evaluators for. But with a guy like Sexton, he was averaging 20 plus points per game on really good efficient shooting numbers. So yeah, is he a point guard? Probably not. Is he point guard size? Yeah. Is he a good defender? That's questionable. I think he
Mhm.
can be when he wants to be, but he's a really good scorer. And that's still, it's funny how scoring has like become like the thing. It feels like in the NBA that's like it doesn't really matter anymore. And like, yeah, now we're seeing like teams scoring record numbers every single night. That Philly Indiana game last night was just unbelievable. What was it, 290 total points or whatever it was? Like, that's kind of where the game is right now.
Yeah, tons of points being. So you know what? It's not on our topics, but let me ask you this: Why? Why
Why is
is
this scoring up?
why is scoring going berserk this year? Somebody was asking me this the other day, and I mentioned the elimination of the take foul rule, and or the creation of the take foul rule, which has allowed for more fast breaks, and so I think that's helped things. But I don't feel like that can fully explain this massive surge in scoring, as well as how many huge comebacks are we seeing right now? Like it feels like unless there's 2 minutes left and you're up 20, no lead is safe in the NBA at this point. Why this season? Why is this all happening?
Yeah, I think so. Two different things. The comeback one, I think, is I think teams shoot more threes than ever
Yeah.
now, and they shoot them better. And that's why no, like you said, no lead is safe. It's you can be up 15, and within the span of 5 minutes, the game is tied. And that's just kind of how it goes. It might not even take five, might take 3 minutes,
Yep.
just with the way teams play. I think why the scoring is up for both individuals and teams. I think it's a combination of even the teams that are ranked low in pace right now still be playing at a super high pace for compared to even 5-6 years ago. So that's factor one. The lack of take fouls, I think that helps, but I don't know that adds more than a couple points per game. Uh, I think the main reason that we are seeing scoring up is we have finally hit the kind of perfect intersection of players plus analytics, where analytics tell a player, not only does it tell them don't shoot mid rangers, it's don't shoot mid rangers off the dribble on the left hand side of the floor with under 10 seconds on the shot clock, right? And they drill that into these guys, and some of these guys get that drilled into them from the time they're 15 and 16 years old. So it's they take better shots. And then the player part of it is, I know people hate this when I say this, they're just better. The players are just better. They're bigger, they're stronger, they're faster, they're more talented, and they're more skilled than they've ever been. And what happens in this is you put them in these positions. Kevin Durant is a perfect example to me of where the basketball has changed as a game. He doesn't like to be called a 7-footer, but we all know he's 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
He is a scoring machine. Whereas if he came in, like when you and I were growing up, it would have been maybe he might have played power forward. If not, you need to bulk up and be a center, develop a back to the basket game, and occasionally we'll let you shoot a jump shot if it's wide open. Mm-hmm. And that's just not how it works anymore. Now, I mean, people who if you're listening to this, you've probably seen Victor Wembanyama. If you have not, just when you're done watching this video, go up to the search and just type in Wembanyama highlights, and it will pull up. And you're going to be like, what is? I don't even know what I'm looking at. Right? This dude is 7'4", and he's shooting off the dribble pull up threes from 35 feet away. You know, sometimes one-legged running 3-pointers, and they're not bad shots. And now what we've had is this combination of the players are better, and now they know what shots to take and when to take them, where to take them from, all those sorts of things. It's just that's to me, it's added to this thing. You also have the league has emphasized offense over defense over the last several years with a lot of their different I don't want to say rule changes, but rules of emphasis and points of emphasis and those kind of things. So you've got a lot of that going on. But yeah, it's just where the game is at today. You know, and we will have a cycle where some genius will come along and figure out this is how we defend better. And then we'll go through a cycle of it'll come down a little, and then we'll sort back into, all right, it'll come back, you know, offense is almost always ahead of defense in the NBA level. And it's just, you know, where it's going now. It's just, you know, and I don't even necessarily think that's a bad thing.
Yeah. I mean, this is made for some really enjoyable basketball. I know there've been a lot of fans who have been saying, well, you know, I miss defense being played and I get frustrated. Like me, one of my pet peeves is small guard drives into the paint and hurls themselves into the closest player and gets a foul call, right? Like that kind of stuff happens in the NBA. So there's good and bad with it. But in general, the skill level is just so high. This is why when people say compare, you know, what would this player be back in the 80s, or what would a player from the 80s be now, or even the 90s, or I mean, hell, even the early, go look at a game from 2002. It almost looks like a different sport that's being played out there. So
Mike Prada does great work with that. He's got he did a whole, it's like basically a basketball picture book, and it's just a bunch of different stuff. And one of the things he highlighted was, I want to say it was like Lakers, it might even been that Lakers Kings series. And it's like you're watching it and it's like, how did anyone ever score in the paint? Because it's 7 dudes all, you know, crowded around the rim, compared to now, like you might have one guy in the paint and he's passing through, right? Like he's cutting through to the other side. It's a completely different game. I believe great players would be great players in any era, whether it be Russell or Chamberlain or Bird or Magic or Kobe. Those guys are going to be great no matter where you put them, because they'd figure out a way to be great, because that's why they're great players. But yeah, some of the guys who like we grew up watching, like, yeah, there just wouldn't be a place for them in the game the way it's played today. Like it wouldn't exist, because they just wouldn't have it, right? Like where, you know, some of these other guys, it would look different. Like people always say, you know, Bird only shot, you know, X% from 3, and it seems like it should be higher. Well, the reality is he only shot that because it wasn't an emphasis shot for him. He
Exactly.
came in the league now, he'd take 9 or 10 threes a game after taking, thousands of them every summer, and he'd be a 45% three-point shooter and he'd be awesome. People say like, well, would Magic still be good? Magic playing at this pace now, he'd be unbelievable. He'd be ripping and running off the boards. I wouldn't shock me if you drop Magic Johnson in today's game. I think he could average 15 or 16 assists. Because the other thing is, he'd kick passes out, guys would actually make shots instead of,
Yeah.
every other one he kick out pass was clanked off the rim, because that's just kind of how the game was played back then.
Well, that's where people say, well, oh, this player X could never play today because he can't shoot. Well, it depends. Are you just getting in the DeLorean, grabbing the player and bringing him back to today and throwing him on the floor? Or are we assuming that player X comes up in today's NBA world? Like, people look at Lamar Odom and say, oh my God, how good would Lamar Odom have been if he was playing in today's NBA? And he's not even been out of the league all that long, but put him in today's NBA, man, he would really be great. Oh, but wait, he didn't shoot the three all that well. Well, you know what? Put him one generation later, and he's practicing threes a lot more than
That's
he
it.
did
Yep.
prior. That it changes so much. Or conversely, teams today, they don't protect the rim the way they used to. Well, you know what? If you were worried about Shaq every single night, you'd get a lot better at your post defense
Exactly.
and post entry passes. People are saying that's a
Oh
lost
my
art.
God. Well,
Part of that is
that's 100% true.
yeah,
Yeah.
but part of
But
that
it's
is the
because nobody
rules.
posts up.
Well,
Exactly.
and teams are now able to scheme out post entry passes a little bit, not quite to the same degree. It used to be just kick to the
Sure.
wing, entry pass to the post. But if you had like a Shaq who was just going to get fed the ball in the post all the time, there's some great centers in the NBA right now. But uh, obviously, the post entry passes would look better. It just depends on what era you're in, and so that's what to me makes it hard to genuinely compare players across eras.
Yeah, it is just, yeah, it's a very different game. I mean, Wilt and Russell played in a league where you took the way you scored was take 5 million shots per game. Like, that was just because nobody could actually shoot, right? Because it was pretty much take layups. Like, jump shots were, all right, well, you took them, but you only took them when you couldn't get a layup and those kind of things. And it's just it's just the game has changed. It's like, I look at it as, for some reason, it's very accepted. It feels like in football that, like, it's just teams pass more now, right?
Mhm.
Like, and it's just, everybody's like, man, it is what it is. And it's like, well, basketball's kind of got the same way, right? It's not that they pass more, but they shoot from the outside more, which is kind of the equivalent to me of the passing game in the NFL game. So that turns into, all right, guys are shooting more from the outside. So it's just, it's one of those things, right? And I don't know that one. Well, I'm not going to say that. I think it's better today. I was going to say I don't know that one's better than the others, because I've watched, like, in the summertime, I'll throw on like those classic NBA games when they're
Yeah.
on NBA TV. And there's sometimes I'm like, I'm like, this is what I grew up watching. Like,
Yep.
this isn't even in high definition. Like, it looks like complete garbage. And then so you get past that, and then it's like, God, this basketball is just so bad. Like, it's so
Yeah.
bad. Last summer they replayed the Knicks Rockets finals, and it was like, I don't even know. There was plays where, like, it was Kenny Smith and Charlie Ward were like the two guys, like, outside. Or probably not Charlie Ward.
Yeah.
It was probably, it might have been Charlie Ward. I
And
don't think it was.
everybody else is in the paint
Yeah, everyone
on both
else is like,
teams.
yeah, no, not only the inside the arc, they're like in the paint.
Yeah.
Like, it's, and it's like, how did Ewing and Olajuwon ever score? Right?
Right.
Like, it's just, yeah, those are the things. But yeah, it's funny. Now I'm thinking about, like, 30 minutes ago, you and I were like, oh, we got a pretty light show. We don't have much to talk about.
and then I went down the rabbit hole of
That's
why
it. It
is
wasn't me
scoring
this
up in the
time.
NBA, and that led
I
us
love
led
it.
us to where we're at now. But we do have a few more news items to get into,
Yeah.
so I guess we'll do that. Especially, maybe I was just trying to avoid this one because it's so awful. But Brandon
Uh,
Clark, torn Achilles, another hit here for the Memphis Grizzlies, who are already dealing with no Steven Adams, although he's getting close to a return. But
mhm.
Brandon Clark torn Achilles, and he is out for the season. Um, and I
And
would imagine probably not ready for next season.
that's it. It's definitely going to drag into next year.
Yeah.
I mean, so this happened, let's just say beginning of March. Achilles is usually a 1 year return. So Sometimes guys will be on the front end of that, but I'm guessing we don't see him much before the first of the year at the earliest
Yeah.
next season. And that's tough. I mean, good for him that he got his contract, right? And he's taken care of, but rough for the Grizzlies, not only the rest of this year, because the Grizzlies were basically set with their front court rotation. They played Adams and Jackson as the starters, Clark and Aldama as the two backups, and that was it, right? We had our four guys, and they all play, and they all play plenty, and off we go. And now you're having to get into some different stuff. Adams will be back, but now you're gonna have to figure some stuff out. And there's not really another Brandon Clark option, and he kind of was like their pseudo Jackson, which right, I think we're
Yeah.
both big Triple J fans, but he still fouls way too much. Like it's like, and the ones that kill me are the ones that are 45 feet from the basket for no
Yeah.
reason. Where it's like, what are you doing? Like
He's
what
he's been
what
a
even
bit
else?
better about it
He's
this
been
season.
better for sure,
I don't
but
recall. I'd have to go and look at this. Who knows? Maybe statistically he's right where he was, but it feels like the silly fouls have been cut down upon
no, that's
by
definitely
Jaren
true.
Jackson.
They're not like they were. They tend to pop up now in like the bad moments, like
Yeah.
against the best teams. And he's the last 2 years he's come down. He's averaged 3.5 fouls per game
Okay.
the last couple of years. So not where it was like 4. And if you're just for perspective for anybody, once you start approaching 4 or more fouls per, you're a foul machine. Like
Yeah.
that basically says,
And you're losing minutes because of it.
exactly. You're never going to be a 30 plus minute per game player because you can't stay on the court long enough to do that. So the Grizzlies, though, as a whole, so related to this and the Ja Morant situation and all that, they are now only a half game ahead of the Sacramento Kings
Yeah.
for the 2 seed in the conference. The Kings are closer to the Grizzlies than they are to the Phoenix Suns in 4th place. So Kings getting a top 4 seed, I'm not going to call it a lock by any means, but it's looking pretty good. They're 4.5 games ahead of the Golden State Warriors, who are in 5th. So they're in pretty good shape here, moving this thing forward. And that's, if you're Memphis now you're in a fight, right? Because I don't know that they'd be scared of going to Sacramento. I don't want to say that. And that also, assumes the Kings make it into the second round. As an aside, if the Kings are hosting game 1 of a playoff series, it's going to be not only must watch TV, it's going to be must go if you're able, because that crowd is going to be, they're going to be beyond bananas. Like, I
Oh,
don't even know
yeah.
what they're going to be, right? I think people have forgotten because we haven't seen them there in 16 years. That was one of the best crowds in the NBA in the playoffs for years when that team was good. So, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to see what that looks like. But, yeah, Memphis, you got to, they're going to get this stuff sorted here and sorted out pretty quickly, because it's all of a sudden what looked like a really promising season where maybe it was like, they're kind of a sneaky finals team. Like it's that doesn't look like, I'm not feeling that way about them anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And they beat, the Pelicans obviously without Zion, but they beat the Pelicans last night without De'Aaron Fox,
Mm-hmm.
which was impressive. They were able
Kings,
to step up and get that one. Yeah. The Kings. Sorry.
Pelicans, yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. The Kings.
Yeah.
Just talking about how good they can
Yeah.
be.
Oh man, they're so fun. How about though Harrison Barnes getting a technical foul? I'll do my quick aside now. That's not on the show rundown. The officiating in last night's games across the board was atrocious.
Yeah.
It was awful. In the Boston Cleveland game, there were multiple phantom calls both ways. Really bad stuff. That end of that Toronto Denver game was an absolute just Scott Foster disaster class of overreacting and throwing Scotty Barnes said,
Yeah.
and
What was that all
multiple
about?
players backed him up on both teams, that Barnes wasn't even talking. He was talking to himself, and Scott Foster threw him out. You had Harrison Barnes getting a tee, which like that's third time in his entire career he's gotten a technical foul. Like, I don't know, man. It was just the Indiana Philly game had a ton of like really kind of ridiculous calls. So it's just let's get this fixed. Like, I don't I don't expect perfection out of the officials. What I can't do is when they make it about them. Like,
Yeah.
no one wants to watch you do anything. Like, just call the game. Like, that's it. You're not part of this. Like, entertainment run at all for anybody watching.
Um, sorry, I'm just checking something here, Mark. Mark Stein
Yeah.
saying that a firearm on team premises is indeed a violation of NBA rules, but there are no specific
Okay.
suspension length. So it might not be a, sorry, this is obviously back to our previous topic. It
Yep.
may not end up being 50-game suspension like he was previously reporting.
Yep. So still could be a suspension. My guess is they're going to kind of let this play out, see how long Ja Morant stays away, and then the NBA may come in and say, we're going to throw a game on top of that just because like this was bad, like, and then we'll
Mhm.
go from there. So yeah, probably not going to be a major suspension coming. So
Okay, let's do a couple of additions here. Goran Dragic to the Bucks. He did not look like he had a ton left in Chicago, but you don't need him to do as much with Milwaukee as they maybe needed it in Chicago. But interesting, I thought that Chicago missing Lonzo Ball, you would think Goran Dragic would have been kind of the guy to maybe step up, at least maybe not start, but still have a bigger role. And instead, they made the decision that Patrick Beverley was the better option for them moving forward. Doesn't give you a lot of faith that Dragic is going to be able to step into Milwaukee and be a significant addition.
I already can see there's going to be a Bucks playoff game, if not games, where Goran Dragic is playing minutes over Javon Carter, and the Bucks fans are collectively losing their minds,
Yeah.
much like George Hill played over Javon Carter at points last year. I don't. It this one is it's fine. Like I don't have any issue with this. They had 2 open roster
Oh yeah.
spots. It seems like I'm gonna guess Myers Leonard may have earned himself that other open roster spot. Like he's done well for them with what they needed him to do. The Bucks, as an aside, they're basically looks like attempting to punt the game in Orlando today. Drew Holiday and Giannis are both going to be out tonight. Giannis non-COVID illness, Holiday neck soreness. So we'll see what that looks like with that. But yeah, it's we'll see. That's fine. I mean, if they want to throw away a game, that's not the end of the world for them. But Dragic, I don't know. I didn't really see a huge need here for this. So this is
It doesn't
probably
hurt, but
no, it certainly doesn't hurt, but gives him a little bit of depth. Maybe lets him catch on for a ring. So if so, good. Let's I mean, good way for him to probably cap off his career. I'm guessing this is probably it for him. Well, we'll see,
yeah.
but I don't know.
Right. I mean, a great career for a guy who, for a little while, was
For
just
sure.
Steve Nash's backup, and then kind of really came into his own.
Remember that Suns team that like almost made the playoffs when like they were universally
Yep.
picked and they missed with like 49 wins or something,
Yep.
like back when the conferences were insanely unbalanced. Yeah, and he made all NBA or yeah, he was all NBA third team, I think, that year, despite not being
Very
an
good.
all-star. Yeah.
Tremendous
Yep.
player. This is doesn't happen all the time, but we have a player coming in from an outside league, from the NBL in
Yeah.
Australia. Xavier Cooks heading to the Washington Wizards. Washington, we talked about them just the other day when they added Jay Huff. Now adding Xavier Cooks to the mix. What are your thoughts on this addition and just players coming in this time of year from overseas in general?
Yeah, when we have seen this, it's historically been players come from China because China's
Uh-huh.
season wraps up early. So does the NBL season. So this will be when the NBL season wraps up. That's more going to be later this month in March. Xavier Cooks will join the Wizards. He's signing on a 2-year deal with Washington, so they're bringing him in, for the look a little bit for the rest of this year, but then gonna keep him on the roster through then. If you're not familiar with Cooks, he is 27 years old. He is a native Australian. He is 6'8", so he's got good size on the wing. He played 4 years at Winthrop. That's when Winthrop was making some noise in college basketball a few years ago. He was a part of those teams. He was a very good player as a senior, averaged 17 points, almost 9 rebounds per game, 3.6 assists, which in college is a pretty healthy number, a steal, and 2 blocks per game in his senior year. So now that was a while ago. So what's he been doing lately? Well, he's played in Germany. He's played in Sydney, Australia this year in 34 games. He's playing about 26 minutes per game. Again, playing time's not the same in these overseas leagues as in the NBA, but 15 points per game on 57% shooting. Doesn't really shoot 3-pointers. He takes about 1 per game. Not a very good 3-point shooter. Not a great free throw shooter either, despite the fact that he gets there quite a bit. But super athletic, almost 8 rebounds per game. Good passer, 3.6 assists per game again. So all really solid stuff. And this is a guy who projects to maybe could be a rotation guy. And if you're Washington, why not? Right? We have the open roster spot. Let's bring him in. Let's see what it looks like. And let's go from there with this. So I think, in this case with Xavier Cooks, I love this kind of deal for the Wizards, who are kind of at the point in their franchise arc of, let's kind of mine for gold somewhere, right? And see if we can, return a gold nugget here and kind of push it forward a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, might as well go ahead, take chances like this, and if it can bleed into next season, you get somebody who can help you out. Great, why not? Give it a shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, tough kid too, super athletic. Like I think people when they see him, they're gonna be like, oh, this guy pops like off the page, like he's really athletic player. So we'll see.
All right. Well, what was going to be our short show wound up being our longer show, which tends to be the case. That's what we usually do. But thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Make sure you are subscribing to the NBA Front Office Show over on YouTube. Love all the interaction that we're seeing on the YouTube channel. Make sure that you turn on those notifications as well. And then over on the podcast side, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is you listen to podcasts, subscribe there, and you can take us with you wherever you go. Until next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.